Good evening, everyone. I, Vishali, editorial assistant at IP Innovative Publication Private Limited, welcomes you all for Reviewers Training Workshop organized by Innovative Education and Scientific Research Foundation, IESRF, organized this event today and I'm sponsored by IP Innovative Publication Private Limited. It is a privilege to have you all join us for today's reviewers workshop dedicated to recognizing important role of peer reviewers in advancing scholarly research. Today's theme will be enhancing the peer review era in AI. Highlights how essential peer review is to maintain the quality and integrity of the academic research. So let me share my slide first. One second. So Reviewers Training Workshop 2026. This review workshop will be a 2-day event in which first day is today, in which we're going to present presentations on some topics, and then tomorrow will be the panel discussion. As we discussed, this Tuesday events will be facilitated by the Innovative Education and Scientific Research Foundation. Innovative Education and Scientific Research Foundation is one of the leading non-profit organization dedicated to medical and scientific research. IESRF is associated with various scientists, medical professionals, research scholars, and students who are dedicated to research and development in the field of medical, health, pharmaceutical, nursing, and dental and allied sciences. Sponsored by IP Innovative Publication Private Limited, is leading publisher in publication of medical, dental, nursing, pharmacy, print and open access books and journals in India and serving since last 15 years. We are currently publishing 58 plus journals and 300 plus books in medical and health science subjects. We believe the power of open access to accelerate and dissemination of the scientific research publication, which makes it accessible to researchers, scholars, academicians, and the researcher community. So it is our privilege to have you all join us for this reviewer workshop dedicated to recognizing the important role of peer reviewers. Now, talking about the key focus areas of today's event, that will be first, opportunities offered by AI in peer review. Second, the risk and limitations of assisted evaluation. Third will be the building responsible, transparent, and trustworthy AI-enabled peer review processes. And fourth will be the research misconduct and ethical challenges. So now when we're talking about the peer review, we all know peer review is an essential part of our peer review process or the pre-publication process basically. So peer review is an independent, talking about peer review is the independent assessment of your research paper by experts in specific field. The purpose of peer review is to evaluate the paper quality and suitability for publication, as well as peer review, acting as a form of quality control for academic journals. It is very useful source of feedback for you. The feedback can be used to improve your manuscript quality before it is published. So at its best, peer review is a collaborative process where authors engage in a dialogue with peer review peers in their field and receive constructive support to advance their work. Now, I would like to welcome our speakers. First, Dr. Hana Ranji Williams, ma'am, Professor and HOD, Department of Ophthalmology, Pondicherry Institute of Medical Science and Puducherry. She is also currently serving as the editor-in-chief of Indian Journal of Clinical and Experimental Ophthalmology. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Vaishali.
Next, the Dr. Sankalp Yadav, sir, Journal Duty Medical Officer, Department of Medicine and Tuberculosis, Shri Madan Lal Khurana Chest Clinic, Moti Nagar Municipal Corporation. He is also currently serving as the editor-in-chief of IP Indian Journal of Immunology and Respiratory Medicine. Next, we would like
Thank
to
you.
welcome
Thank you,
Dr.
Vaishali.
K. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us,
Okay.
even in your
Oh,
busy
pleasure.
schedule, sir.
Oh,
Next,
pleasure.
Dr. Next is Dr. Ketki Kalle, ma'am, Associate Professor, Department of Oral Pathology and Microbiology, BYWS Dental College and Hospital, Amravati, Maharashtra. Welcome, ma'am. She
Thank
is
you.
also the Associate Editor, Journal of Oral Medicine and Oral Surgery, Oral Pathology and Oral Radiology. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. And also I'd like to welcome Dr. Nikita ma'am, founder and director of IP Innovative Publication, who has been the prime source of guidance behind this training workshop. Welcome, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so now I would like to welcome Dr. Hana ma'am to come and present her presentation on the topic AI ethics and trust in the global research evaluation system. Hana ma'am.
Thank you so much, Vaishali, for your kind introduction. And thank you all for joining today. I'll just share my screen. I hope you can all see my slides.
Yes, madam. Please make it on slideshow.
Okay. Yes. So, good afternoon, everyone. The topic which was allotted to me was very interesting. The role of the peer reviewer in shaping scholarly integrity and research impact. I'm Dr. Hannah, Editor-in-Chief of the Indian Journal of Clinical and Experimental Ophthalmology, and I'm also Professor and Head, Department of Ophthalmology and of Medical Sciences. So the objectives of today's talk are to examine the purpose of peer review, to look at the ethical responsibilities of peer reviewers, to examine the peer reviewer's role in strengthening methodology and reproducibility, and to see how peer review influences research impact. We'll also look at some exciting emerging trends in peer review. I just thought we'd start with an interesting case. So 2026 is already one of the worst years for US measles infections since the year 2000. Way back in 1998, Dr. Andrew Wakefield published a paper in The Lancet suggesting a link between the MMR measles vaccine and autism. It was based on a case series of 12 children, and it received enormous media attention. The public were terrified. No one wanted to vaccinate their children. Vaccine rates fell around the globe, and measles began to emerge again. Years later, investigations revealed undisclosed conflicts of interest, methodology flaws, and ethical violations by Dr. Wakefield. The paper was retracted in the year 2010, and Wakefield's registration was cancelled. 15 years later, we are still seeing the effects of this. So does measles vaccine lead to autism? It has been repeatedly proven that it doesn't. So this is one of the most consequential failures of peer review in medical history. Peer review should check the methodology, the sample size, statistical inference, and ethical issues. In this case, there was insufficient scrutiny, a failure to probe for any conflicts of interest. And this has undermined trust in medical research, and it has resulted in a large-scale, highly preventable morbidity. So as peer reviewers, we are not just gatekeepers of scientific clarity. We are the very custodians of public trust. Damage extends far beyond the pages of the journal. It affects clinics, classrooms, communities, and in this case, our precious children. Scholarly integrity is not just an abstract value, it is a public good. We ensure that each and every manuscript that we receive undergoes a thorough and unbiased evaluation. Now, to do a good review and to do it in large numbers consistently over a large number of years is a tedious job, and it's often thankless. One manuscript often takes at least 1 hour to go through, that is, reading right from the title down to the references. So as Vaishali correctly said, peer review is the process by which scholars assess the quality and the accuracy of one another's research papers. Since way back in the 17th century, peer review has been the cornerstone of scientific publishing. Very little has changed. In the 17th century, in Britain, the British Medical Journal, they started peer review by sending articles out to two researchers in the same field who didn't know each other, who didn't know who the researcher was. They reviewed the manuscripts and gave their comments independent of each other. So when you look at it that way, very little has actually changed in peer review. It remains the only method of quality control in medical publishing, and it is also a moral compass. At its best, peer review refines ideas. It detects errors and it encourages connections. Whereas at its worst, it delays innovation. I'm sure all of us have had a lot of experience waiting for a decision on our manuscript. So peer review is a slow process and it often delays innovation. It may perpetuate bias and occasionally it does not detect misconduct. So who are these invisible but influential peer reviewers? who can be anonymous but authoritative. They're no one but ourselves. When we write the manuscript, we are the researcher, we are the authors. When we peer review, we're looking at our own colleague's paper. We need to dissect the study design, look at the statistics, and check for ethical compliance. Because at its core, peer review is an ethical enterprise. It safeguards against fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism, which are the types of research misconduct. Fabrication is making up data or results. So we need to be very alert and have our suspicious antennae up to check whether there's any fabrication. Falsification means changing the results, or sometimes not changing, just omitting or misreporting data or results. And plagiarism is using the ideas or words of another person without giving appropriate credit where it's due. So one of the cornerstones of peer review is transparency. We need to look at the study and see, was informed consent taken from all of the participants? Is there an institutional ethics certificate for this study? And there are various guidelines. For randomized controlled trials, we have the CONSORT guidelines, which is a 30-point checklist, which we can go through to see whether the study was done ethically. And then we have the STROBE for observational studies. These checklists help a lot in transparency and checking the study design. If there is any conflict of interest, as peer reviewers, it is our duty to decline peer reviewing that article. As an individual, I may have conflicts of interest at my individual level. It may be somebody in my family who's the author. In that case, I'm not the ideal peer reviewer. Or it may be somebody who I don't get along with in my department. Again, these are conflicts of interest, and I should not take up to peer review such articles. And we all have certain organizational conflicts of interest. Suppose I get an article to review and it was done in the institution from where I was thrown out 2 years ago. Again, I should decline to review such articles. Personal benefit. If I have any monetary or any benefit from that manuscript, I am not the best person to peer review it. Simultaneous roles. If you are the author, definitely you are not the best person to peer review it. So all this needs to be declared. But of course, nowadays, some of the very niche research, there are very few people in those fields. So it's difficult to find peer reviewers. So occasionally, even if you disclose, this is my friend, this is somebody who I know very closely, when you tell the editor, if there is no one else available, they may still ask you to peer review, but you need to be open and transparent and tell the editor that there is such a conflict of interest. The decision will be taken on that manuscript, the result declared. And if there is conflict of interest, it is unethical, and nowadays it is even illegal. So I said it often takes 1 hour to go through the manuscript. So don't sit down when you have 5 minutes in your car or you're waiting at the traffic light. That is not the best time to do a peer review. You need to sit somewhere comfortably where you won't be disturbed too much and have at least 60 minutes to review the article. You need to go through the entire article from the beginning to the end, reading every word. And once you've gone through it quickly, then you will have some basic understanding of the manuscript. At that time, we need to go through each word again, scrutinize the sample size. How was the sample size calculated? What was it based on? Is this an adequate sample size for this study, for these objectives, this conclusion? Look at the randomization procedures. How were the patients randomized into various groups? Look at the blinding. Have the patients been blinded? Are the doctors blinded? You need to check the statistical analysis very, very closely. And look at how the data has been interpreted. This is called a critical appraisal of the manuscript. So this is what peer reviewers have to do with every manuscript which comes to them. And check the conclusion. The conclusion should align with the objectives, and it should not exceed the evidence. Many times we see in manuscripts the conclusion is written and it is very correct, but it has nothing to do with the study objectives at all. So we should check that the conclusion aligns with the objectives of that study and it does not exceed evidence. Limitations of the study must be stated very clearly and the implications should be written reasonably. I would just like to put one word about uploading manuscripts to AI. Nowadays, we find AI is a shortcut for many things in our lives, and definitely it is going to be a part of our lives, whether we like it or not. But peer reviewers do not have the authority to upload any manuscript to any AI platform, because once you have uploaded it to AI, it is in the World Wide Web. That manuscript is there, that data is there, and we don't know what will happen later. Will it be rejected by the plagiarism softwares later? And what will be done with that data? Who will use it? Who will misuse it? All these things are still not clear. So we request all peer reviewers to avoid uploading the entire manuscript to AI. So peer review is nothing but a balancing act. We have to be conservative, as in we cannot take every new discovery at face worth. But at the same time, we have to be open to innovations. So this is a very delicate balance. We need to be very, very confident in that subject and be able to balance stopping something new against introducing something innovative and new. We should not be too skeptical. Many of us are set in our ways, and we were taught this, we want to follow this. We are not open to new ideas. We're often very, very skeptical. So we need to keep our minds open, and we need to be sufficiently alert to the flaws which we may encounter while checking a manuscript. Two very important examples from history are, initially when doctors came up and said that peptic ulcers were caused by the bacteria Helicobacter pylori, nobody accepted it. Everybody said, what nonsense. We all know that it's acid which causes gastritis and peptic ulcers. It cannot be an infection. We know it's not an infection. However, years later and lots of patient research, it has been proven beyond doubt that Helicobacter pylori is the cause of peptic ulcers. And another example from my own field of ophthalmology, when the intraocular lenses were initially introduced, none of the papers, none of the journals were willing to publish papers on intraocular lenses. They said, who will put a foreign body into the eye? So all the stalwarts like Duke Elder in ophthalmology, they refused to endorse this practice of putting in an intraocular lens, which is now the accepted norm. So we need to balance between being skeptics and between assessing the research for what it's worth and giving due credit. We also come a lot of bias, whether we like it or not. As human beings, we are biased. We are biased as for gender. Some people like women, some people don't like women. So all these bias should not come into our assessment of a manuscript. And then there are geographical. We are very fascinated by foreign manuscripts. So if the study is done in France or the US, we have that bias, geographical bias. Even North India, South India, there may be some bias, or somewhere where you lived before. And institutional bias, sometimes it may be negative bias where you don't like one institution, you feel it's low quality, so the manuscript coming from there may be low quality. And often it is a positive bias. Manuscript coming from AIIMS, no need to read, it must be good, we should publish this. However, we are not there to look at all these things, and we should not be biased. And language also, when we look at a study, sometimes the grammar really puts us off. Who can even read through this poor grammar? The language, these are all the biases which we have inbuilt into us as human beings. But we have to remember that we are not there to judge institutions, countries, or grammar. We are there purely to judge the scientific quality. And believe me, there are so many manuscripts which come out of small, unheard of institutions which have done such good quality research. So many longitudinal studies are coming from small centers. So we should not have these bias, and we have to be aware that these may exist. And the way that we overcome this, definitely in innovative journals, most of the peer review is done blinded. That is, the author doesn't know who is reviewing their articles, and the reviewer does not know who is the author of this article. So single blind, where the author doesn't know, but the reviewer knows who has written the article. This is not to be encouraged. And of course, nowadays we are moving to an open review where everything is known. The author knows who the reviewers are, and the reviewers know who the authors are. But this leads to certain inhibitions. The reviewer may be hesitant to criticize the author when they know, especially if it is a prominent personality in that field. It's very difficult to give your own unbiased opinion, honest opinion, when you know who the author is. So just be aware of all this bias and try to avoid it. So coming to peer review, it is largely uncompensated. We do it out of professional altruism and we're trying to pay it forward. What do I mean by that? When I was starting out as a researcher, somebody has taken the time to go through my half-baked manuscript. They have given comments which have led to that being publishable, and with that, I achieved my first publication. Hours of work are done on both sides, both on the author's and the peer reviewer's side. It's very debatable whether peer reviewers should get credit. Of course, nowadays there's Publons and Web of Science where you can get credit for doing this work. And some institutions have even started to give promotions based on the number of articles that you peer review. But whether it should be paid monetarily, like whether money should be given for peer reviewing, there are pros and cons both for and against it. So we do it because somebody has helped us. If we bring money into it, then we will get a different level of peer reviewers. However, innovative publication, you get credit points. For every manuscript that you review, you will get credit points. And these credit points can be used against your article processing fee. So you get some compensation. I think that is the best way to work through this. If we bring money into this, definitely the altruism will be gone, and a lot of people who only are doing it for monetary gain will be doing it very fast. They will review 10 papers in 1 hour so that they'll get the money. So I am very much against it, but there are different points of view. So what does the future hold? AI is definitely the future. AI is very good for repetitive tasks, for things like screening the manuscripts to see whether all the parts of the manuscript are complete, checking whether the references are in order. I think most of us are already using things like EndNote for our references. And in innovative publication, we have Authenticate, which checks for plagiarism and also AI generated text. So this is the future. However, it's unlikely that AI will replace reviewers completely because AI does not have human judgment. And remember, AI only knows what it's been taught. So it will be at a complete loss when it comes to newer research. I definitely think it will be hybrid reviewing. It will be a combination of both AI tools and humans. One will not replace the other in the future. And we're also moving towards an open peer review where the authors and the reviewers will be aware of who is reviewing their articles. Just one word on the interesting post-publication review, which some journals have started doing. So after the manuscript is published online, anyone can go read that article and publish their own review. So this post-publication reviews have actually brought up a lot of errors in the methodology or picked up problems which the regular peer reviewers have not been able to do. So this may also be in the future. While peer review is imperfect, it is evolving. And we need to remember that we are shaping science, not just the manuscripts. And insufficient scrutiny can have lasting, catastrophic consequences. I came across this sentence as I was reading up for today's presentation. To review is not merely to judge, it is to steward the truth. So if we remember that, and we remember that the manuscripts are written by our own colleagues and we are polite, courteous, and encourage them, then we will be doing our job well. So just to recap quickly, peer reviewers safeguard scholarly integrity. Critical appraisal strengthens the methodology and it prevents exaggerated or misleading claims. Transparency improves accountability and trust, and responsible review is necessary to maintain public trust. Thank you all for your patient listening. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
And thank you actually by listening your presentation. But my doubt was clear today regarding the ethical, is it ethical to uphold like uploading the unpublished articles on AI tools? Because This is actually an unethical process. So I'm quite doubtful about it. So today I'm just clear about it. Thank you for presentation, ma'am. I would like to welcome Dr. Sankalp Yadav sir to present his presentation. I will request Nikita ma'am to start his presentation because sir will be in traveling right now.
Yeah,
Sir,
thank you, Vaishali. First of all, thank you, Dr. Hannah. It was a wonderful presentation. I will just add on to a few more points with my presentation on the topics which actually you have just started, and let's start this thing. I hope the slide is visible. Yeah, the vital role of mesh terms and citations. This is a topic which was assigned to me by Dr. Nikita, and which I actually believe is very important for all those burgeoning researchers and obviously reviewers as well. So let's go to the next slide. Can you move this next slide, please? Yeah. So the terms included in the mesh vocabulary. This includes some few important terms like headings, subheadings, supplementary concept records, and publication type. Next, please. To elaborate on this, what are these? Basically, heading, it is the concept mentioned in the biomedical literature. It is actually the descriptors. Subheadings, these are attached to the mesh headings, are subheadings, which are actually the qualifiers about the descriptors that we have already mentioned in the heading. That is clearly describe a definite aspect of a concept. SCR, this is related to chemicals, drugs, and rare diseases, which are labeled. And a publication type describes the type of research that is indexed. Next, please. So, how to search for mesh terms on the PubMed database? There are certain terms there are certain methods like using the mesh browser, using the mesh keywords from the selected PubMed articles, or using the mesh on demand tool, which are easily available on the websites and also easily accessible to the internet through the internet. Sorry. Go ahead, please. Next. So using mesh browser. So I actually thought of giving you a practical experience of this, but somehow because of the paucity of time and other commitments, I'm not able to include that thing here. But it is very simple. Anyone can just open the PubMed homepage and explore and look for the explore or more resources. It's just mentioned over there, and click on the mesh database link. The window shows showing the word mesh on the left hand side of the ribbon will be seen. From here, you look for the horizontal panel where you can type the words for the direct search for mesh terms. You can type any word related to your research. For example, you can type a drug resistance, then you will get all the articles related to the drug resistance where the mesh terminology has been used. And then just, you have to click the search. The next page will show the definition of the word that has typed. Yeah, that's just what I've mentioned. And next, please. So using mesh keywords from the selected PubMed articles. So this is very also simple. Open an abstract of a relevant article and look below the abstract for the mesh terms. It will show all of the mesh terms related to that article. Go ahead. Using the mesh on demand tool. This is another method of utilizing these terms. So here you can copy and paste up to 10,000 characters. Following this, mesh terms are highlighted using natural language processing and NLM medical text indexer. So these are the terminologies which you will come across, and the moment you will start searching these mesh terms on the website which I've highlighted, you will become familiar with all these terminologies. It helps the authors in looking up mesh keywords even without having done the mesh indexing, or even in looking up or any downloads of mesh for the article. I'll explain it later. You can start by passing the link which is mentioned here on the browser to open the mesh on demand tool. And after copying and pasting the concerned text or abstract, press the button that reads find mesh term. All mesh terms will be highlighted in the paragraph, and the list of ranked mesh words or an alphabetical list of mesh terms will be displayed on the right side of the screen. Please go ahead for the next screen. So impact of mesh terms on citation. Why do we need all these mesh terms? There is certain thing called as citations. A researcher needs citation. If you have written a wonderful paper, if nobody, cites it, you don't get credit for it. And in research field, it is very important. Ultimately, your impact related to your research, everything is related to the quality of the article, the citation it has, the international citations that it is attracting. These are very important. I'm not talking about the self citations here because I don't think it is a point of discussion right now. And so the impact of mesh citation, as I said, it increases the scientific visibility of the article and its chances of being retrieved by the authors who are performing a literature search for relevant topics. The mesh database has a hierarchy or tree structure because of which both broader and more specific searches yield better results, as I've highlighted. And the terms are annually updated in the English language to reflect changes in terminology. and account for variations in language, synonyms, and alternate spellings. So if you are using one mesh term like drug resistance, if any other, any other relevant thing has also been highlighted, it will be shown in all those four tools that I've mentioned. Next, please. So the pros of mesh terms. So this is also one of the things that I've highlighted just now. Mesh terms provide a universal article labeling system. It's very, it's very easy to find an article using a mesh term than to just search and keep finding through all those data which is available through the net. And the official words or phrases that are labeled as mesh terms represent a particular biomedical concept in the medline, as I just said just now. And the official mesh list provides terms for indexers to label an article. So a particular category will be, identified through this thing. A particular mesh term will be utilized to identify all the articles belonging to that category. This particularly helps in locating articles specific to a particular topic. It is easier to find and read all those articles in a one go than to find it on Google and just keep on searching and all. And efficient search is facilitated by mesh terms. Next, please. So the impact of using and not using mesh terms. So there are, it has multiple impacts, both on the journal, obviously on the researcher as well, and you as a reviewer. I mean, obviously this is this is a workshop for, this is a webinar for the reviewers. So ultimately, all those you people are interested in the research. That's why you are here. So at the end of the day, someday or the other, you will be also writing, and it is always good to be familiar with these terminologies, because the moment someday you will be giving a webinar on mesh, then you will be utilizing all these things. So it's very important. These are the basics of research. Unfortunately, in India, although medical colleges are supposed to include all these things, but nobody taught this thing. I published my first paper in my third year of medical college, and I know how difficult it was. I had to run here and there to write multiple times. The paper was sent back because of this or that errors. I'm not talking about the scientific. There were so many grammatical issues, this and that. But at the end of the day, I ultimately refined myself. Ultimately, published about like 290 odd currently and going on. Fingers crossed. So impact of using and not using mesh terms. So if mesh terms are not used as keywords by authors in the journal, does not insist on its use, this leads to poor visibility of the article. As I said, thereby reducing the chances of the article being cited, which I also told you earlier. And the impact of this is dual. For the author, there are less chances of their paper being cited and them being recognized and acknowledged in the research. And for the journal, there is a lower impact factor. The impact factor is calculated by the number of articles that are cited from the journal in the last 2 years. So if your article is not cited because of the lack of mesh terms, obviously, the journal gets impacted. The impact factor of the journal is impacted, and ultimately it has adverse effects on the researcher and the journal, directly or indirectly. Go ahead, please. So the limitations, one may there are certain limitations as well. This is like I've mentioned here. One may or may not be able to retrieve an article that was recently published. Yeah, there are certain journals like who actually get all their articles published during 1 month, uploaded on the Medline. So because of that, those ultimately new words, the new mesh terms or all those things, you might not be able to retrieve through the search processes I've told you earlier. But at the end of the day, after 1 month or so, sometimes in a quarterly, sometimes after 15 days, this gets uploaded, and it is easier to find those things on the Medline. So as mesh terms are not available for most genes, yeah, for those actually working in the genetic field, mesh terminologies are relatively sparse. It is difficult to find research topics with gene names at times. Mesh terms may not be added to the latest emerging research. This is also quite possible. And the articles are also difficult to retrieve. They are not indexed for Medline. I mean, like if the journal, if PubMed includes over 1.5 million articles that are not indexed with mesh for Medline. So that is also a limitation, I could say. But there are other methods as well where you could just get through this thing if you are actually looking for the article. In these circumstances, obviously, as I said, keyword search would be the best way to retrieve the articles. Next, please. So there are some of the references. I'm actually, it was a very concise sort of thing because of the webinar and because of my time, because of time issues. But I think I've highlighted the importance of this thing. And in case of any question or anything, you could just raise your hand. I'll be able to help. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session. And
pleasure.
actually, there are many people, even including many authors, who are submitting articles to our publication, are seriously unaware about the MASH terms, and we have to guide them about the MASH terms. I think today they'll know what is actually a MASH term is and why it is important. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Now I would,
actually, the one thing that is very important related to our journal, our all journals is we are actually highlighting this thing. We're using the mesh term. I was the one,
yes, sir.
highlighted Dr. Lalit, Dr. Anna, and Dr. Ketki were the, first people, few people who were actually highlighting all these things, and I'm happy like we are using all those things. Okay, go ahead. I guess we are running short of time, so go ahead with the next
Yes,
presentation, Dr. Ketki.
yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And now, Dr. Ketki, ma'am, please present your presentation, ma'am.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sankalp sir, for setting a stage with different because Hana ma'am has also briefed certain things about AI. Then we had a cocktail combination with mesh terms. So I think this is a correct way of going about my presentation. Let me share the screen. Okay, so my screen is visible.
Yes, madam. Please make it on PPT mode.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. So, well, a very, very interesting topic of AI ethics and trust in the global research impact. I would like to say that, the boom around AI has made all of us, we are all in a way sensitized of whether to use AI, not to use AI, how much to use AI, what is the, correct formula for using AI. Okay. So I would try to touch upon elements because three things in one topic was really overwhelming for me to concise. Now let's see a brief about glance about everything. So first I would like to say that uh, AI has become an explosion, almost like an explosion, because every day some new update is coming. Okay, and we are supposed to remain very, very flexible and adaptable towards all the AI happenings around. So it's just like an explosion. Data processing, knowledge generation, design support, framing of hypothesis, literature synthesis, scientific communication, everything, right from discoveries also AI is doing. Okay, so this is just like an explosion, and we are almost overwhelmed by the discovery of the bots that are coming in. So I would like to say that being ignorant at this point is not, is not a defense, right? AI may assist thinking and communication. It must not replace our scientific judgment, authorship, and accountability towards research. So first, let's understand what is AI, because two sides of the same coins we will try to discuss. AI as a hero when it comes to making our researches more polished, more accurate, and more easy to percolate in the society. At the other time, the evil side of the AI. So until and unless we don't understand it, we cannot use it to our advantage. Okay, so AI is conceptualized as a scientific discipline of computer engineering. Okay, wherein it is all matter has also been seen defined objectives. Okay, where it is capable of performing tasks that require perception, reasoning, judgment, and decision making, just like humans. Okay, so this scholarly disclosure, or when we are using it in scientific research, it employs to both the senses of AI, the technological senses and the consciousness that that discipline is supposed to have. So these are certain of the systems that we are knowing current AI and artificial consciousness. So what is narrow AI? Narrow AI is task-specific artificial intelligence system. That is, you make AI ready for playing a chess, for example, or reading of some medical records. That is a very, very task-specified AI. Okay, which comes under narrow AI. Whereas broad AI is a multidisciplinary use of AI, that AI can actually multitask. Okay, with such flexibility like humans, or maybe at times better than humans. Okay, so it has got a generalized intelligence as compared to the limited programmed capacity of narrow AI. Okay, whereas artificial consciousness is having multi-domain expertise just like broad AI, and plus the conscious attributes that humans will have, humans are supposed to have. So at this point in time, we have narrow AI, which is fully functional. We have broad AI, which is, in achieving. We are yet to reach, but the process is ongoing. Whereas this artificial consciousness is, what is in theories right now. And all the scientists who are in the AI domain want to achieve this artificial consciousness level in AI. So what is machines or trains AI to think like humans? Okay, so it gives certain algorithms, okay, from which AI can take human-like decisions at times. So at this point, when machine learning, we are talking about machine learning. So there are various branches in machine learning also, like decision trees, etc. But what is mostly used in our scientific communication is the artificial neural networks, or ANN. Now, what are these artificial neural networks? These are programmed neurons, just like biological neurons. Okay. And how are they programmed? By giving dozens of inputs. Okay. So a neuron, which is an artificial neuron, actually receives millions of inputs, to achieve an output from it. Okay. So those inputs are in the form of weightings, and these are the weights. The image that is shown here. So this is the input that we are giving. These are all the hidden layers of the artificial neural networks, wherein millions of neurons are interconnected, just like what our biological neurons are. And this is the output layer. Hence, when it comes to specific use of AI in responsible tasks that we will see in the coming slides. Okay. So why is so much of hype regarding the AI ML then? So I have just tried to give a basic glimpse of how does machine learning works, how does an AI works. So now what actually is the hype? Okay. Hype regarding AI, especially in terms of scientific research and publications, is about generative AI, okay, actually helping us generate high quality content, high quality images, and other content that that is based on the data that we are giving. Okay, so the rise of generative AI has made the system so much overwhelmed that in just a few years it has reached expert level of text proficiency, right? To such an extent that systems like ChatGPT, they have passed medical and law examination. Okay, it has scored about 93 percentile in the Scholastic Aptitude Test, and scored 89th percentile in the SAT math exams. Okay, so that's why it was also used very judiciously in the early 2021 and 2022 to write scientific papers of various scientists all over the world, and they used to cite the bot as the author of that paper. So this practice was followed previously when AI was just around the corner and not that much of hyped thing. Okay, these are certain of the systems and LLMs that we use, okay, very commonly used, and these are known to actually score good marks, not just in terms of medical exams, but even in law clearing exams. Okay, so everywhere. Then what is the concern about it? So concern is the error or the bias in AI systems. Okay, what are errors? So when human errors, okay, human errors, we call it as fraud or intentional misconduct, and we can hold that human responsible for that code of conduct. Okay, so it can be what to say, it can be made it is lawfully solvable problem. Whereas when error in AI is there, so what is an AI error? It is basically mistake that the AI does based upon what the input was. Okay, so input, the desirable output and the correct output. Okay, so the error is the gap between these two, and AI cannot be held responsible for whatever it is stating. Okay, so that is a very big problem as far as AI errors are concerned, and when especially we are using it in medical science and for drafting very responsible reports in drugs or medicine. So what are the biases now? From error, we are coming to AI biases. So AI systems have such filters, okay, which are developed by its developers, which actually provide lot of ethnic and racial biases, okay, also political bias, or of the AI makers. Now this thing, when it comes to the medical research, there are many of the diseases that are genome related, okay? Those are genetic, and certain diseases which runs in the ethnicity or the particular genome group. So in such cases, AI biases produces a huge problem as far as interpreting of the data is concerned. And also because inputs are heavy, okay, the weightings are heavy, so we cannot even tell that from where this AI is becoming what data, okay? So that actually produce lot of bias when AI gives you ultimate outputs. Now, these are certain of the, errors and negative impact that the AI has created very recently in 2023, 2024 in certain of the research papers, okay? So this paper, it was published in Frontiers of Molecular and Cell Biology, which is a very high impact factor journal, in which the scientists have actually used AI for generating the images of rat organs, okay? And since the AI was not particularly very much trained upon such kind of rat models, it gave a different picture of the organs. And scientists, without even going into the intricacies, they published the picture. So the paper was retrieved, and the scientists were warned of using the AI in such a manner by not cross-verifying it. And secondly, even the recent paper has cited that ChatGPT, especially version 3.5, when it is used for referencing or bibliometry, so it can produce about 47% of fabricated and inaccurately cited references. Okay. Study shows that nearly half of generated citations may be false or misused, highlighting the persistent reliability concerns despite of improvements in the newer version. So it is said that ChatGPT version 4.0 has got much better performance as far as the citations are concerned, but still the flaws are too much. So about 47% is a high number. Now, coming to why are the ethics in AI use mandatory, okay, and what ethics actually should be used while while making the use of AI in our research. So there are certain limitations in the narrow AI system, especially, okay, that is lack of consciousness, self-awareness, emotions, lived experience, as well as moral agency. As we all know, we are just about to shift to broad AI, which can efficiently multitask and think at least like a human. But we are far away from the advent of artificial consciousness, which will make AI responsible for the text that it is giving or the output that is being generated. Okay. So there is no true understanding of the context of the real world meaning. Okay. It will just give you the output based on what data is available. The machine learning algorithms will just search for the keywords or the similar words. Okay. It will not apply those findings in the real world context about what we are talking. Okay. So no meaningful connection is there in the physical world. When we are talking about communications in medicine, lot of it is required. Risk in medicine is that it can pass medical exams though, okay, because the pattern of the paper and the questions is in a very set format. It may still produce factually incorrect or dangerous advice. So it was, the recent very interesting case wherein a lady, a widow of a lawyer in US, reported or sued AI system because that a lawyer actually committed a suicide because it was in chatting with a chat bot, wherein he was actually telling his state of mind to that bot, and he was seeking medical advice from that bot. So finally, that bot gave him the advice that for this disease has got a suicidal tendency, and ultimately a person can commit a suicide wherein he can get released out of a disease, and that advocate actually committed suicide. So it was on the headlines of New York Times, and a very, very unfortunate event. Hence, AI can actually give very dangerous outputs without applying it to the relevant context in the physical world. So that is so much understandable because AI works on pattern recognition and it doesn't have true understanding. Okay. Next is the black box problem. Okay. So what is a black box problem? Black box problem is the one because even the experts, those who have developed the code of that particular AI, even they cannot after a while, after that system, after that bot has actually learned through machine learning, after a while, even the experts cannot identify that what weightings are being used by that bot currently. Okay, even the makers won't understand the problems in the AI after a short while, which makes it even more dangerous to use. Okay, because if doctor doesn't know what the disease is, how can it treat that disease? Okay, it will go on increasing. So that is the black box problem as far as AI and machine learning is concerned, that they cannot meaningfully interpret the thousands of weights. That is the input threshold that we have seen before, and the billions of internal calculation that our artificial neural networks will do, okay, along the way of learning. So that is the reason why AI opacity is ethically concerning, because there is no transparency after a while. So black box problem, we have all seen in the air disasters. Okay. So why the black box matters so much, that even after the air disasters of 2 to 3 unfortunate air crash events that we have witnessed in these 2 years, so even black box couldn't be decoded, right? Because of this mysterious technology that automation is bringing in. So coming to the ethical norms. Ethical norms of science, we all know what are those. So we all, being the researcher and the reviewer community, we know that these are the principal core values and virtues that are essential for conducting a good research. Okay. And without these ethical norms in science, we cannot call ourselves as researchers, or a scientist cannot call himself or herself as scientist, because without any SOPs in ethics, a science remains a pseudoscience. Okay. So what are the current ethical norms? Right now, we all are practicing to reporting of data honestly. We disclose conflicts of interest. We maintain accurate research records. Okay, we have consents. So all those guidelines we do follow currently. So now we will see that what the future of our system should have as ethical norms. Okay, what the publications and journals should actually have as ethical norms when it comes to AI use and AI biases. Okay, so first is, we will see what is the problem, then we will see what can be the expected solution from the researchers, from the reviewers, from the journal houses. Okay, first is the AI bias, in which AI in medical research can amplify the existing biases, as we know, in health, like race, gender, socioeconomic status, as we have seen before, that AI doesn't have any filters towards this. Okay, it doesn't report anything related to ethnicity or age or gender per se. So this can actually create disparities through biased model and policies. What is the solution to this? That to uphold ethical obligations, scientists must ensure that research design and careful data analysis, while actively addressing the data diversity. So whosoever is developing the AI models should also focus over the diversity in sampling and representativeness to minimize the bias and improve the quality of the output that our AI can generate. Okay. So what step is already taken in this regard from Biden administration? They have signed an executive order currently that directs the federal agencies to identify and reduce bias and protect the public from this algorithm discrimination. Coming to AI random errors. So AI random errors in AI processing, such as radiologic image analysis, if we see, right now, so many medical devices are being constructed using the AI ML models, especially in terms of diagnosis, right? So this is especially true when it comes to radiological and pathological parameters in diagnosis. So this random errors in AI processing, such as radiologic image analysis in cancer, drug trials, or infectious disease transmission modeling, it can harm the current patients and undermine future treatment safety and also epidemic control efforts. So what is the solution? That scientists are using AI research, they should transparently disclose and discuss that what are the possible and potential limitations of the AI that they are using to report the medical images or the pathological reports. Okay. This will actually inculcate the trustworthiness among and reproducibility of the data. Now, what is the error reduction strategy already implemented by people is they have quality assurance measures such as auditing data and systems, validating the analytical tools, just like you do for your statistical analysis tools, right? So similar auditing and is done for the AI tools also that we have used. Okay. And systematically investing the errors to improve the scientific accuracy. For black box problem, the ethical norms are, you have to have the type, name, and version of the AI that that the system is using. What tasks were done by using the AI? Okay, that also needs to be specified. How and when and by which contributor this system was used. Means if tomorrow, if the data appears to be falsified, or if the data has been seen to create some problems in as far as the reports are concerned, then the person who has used the bot would be taken into consideration. Okay, so liability has to be there with the person and not with the bot, that this has been given by X bot. No, the person who has used the bot for the data analysis will be held responsible for that particular research. Why a certain system was used instead of alternatives available? What aspects of a system are not explainable? Example, weightings. Okay. Technical details related to models, architecture, training data, and optimization procedures. All these things are to be actually reported by the authors in paper that can be done under the material and method section. So ideally, details about AI use should become a standard part of research reporting, included in the materials and methods or supplementary sections, similar to how statistical methods and softwares that we use are documented currently in the research papers. So AI, confidentiality, and moral agency. So one of the biggest problem that we all are facing today is the confidentiality of data, especially with the advent of AI. AI is taking all our details, right, from how we will look in our age 80. So all those details and all those photographs currently AI is having. So what are the, confidentiality rules? So the use of AI, especially the generative models, raises significant data privacy and confidentiality risks, as user submitted information may be stored and it will be retained by the system. Okay. So what is the solution? Researchers should avoid using generative AI or to edit or review documents containing confidential or personal information, as such content cannot be assumed to remain private. So in NIH recently have actually told, and in 2023, that you cannot use AI tools for actually having your research paper in place. So due to concerns about the breaches of confidentiality, the National Institutes of Health, they have prohibited the use of AI technologies such as LLMs in the grant peer review process. Now, these are certain of the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors guidelines. Okay, this is a statement in 2023, which has said that AI used in research publications is completely author's responsibility. Authors must always disclose the AI use at submission. Okay, clearly describe how AI was used in the cover letter of the manuscript itself. AI tools, example, chatbots, they cannot be listed as authors, which previously were listed, because they cannot be held accountable for the research data that they are giving. Okay. Human authors are fully responsible for accuracy, integrity, and originality of the data that they are procuring. Carefully review and edit AI generated content. It may be incorrect, incomplete, or even biased. Do not cite AI as an author or co-author. Ensure no plagiarism, including AI generated text or images. Provide proper attribution and full citations for all the reference material. And here is a big role, because as we have seen that even ChatGPT 4.0 and even now the latest version which will come, which is 5, even they are not able to fix this problem of citations. Okay. However, I would like to say that AI is not completely a devil in itself. It has got two sides of the same coin. Okay. So legal implications of AI's lack of moral agency, that you cannot be AI systems cannot be recognized as inventors or patents or holders of any copyrights, as these legal rights are granted only to persons under most patent and copyright laws of most of the countries. While AI system cannot be listed as authors or inventors, their contribution should always be transparently acknowledged to ensure honesty and prevent undue credit being given solely to human contributors. Now, why this sentence is very important, because in from 1960s there are so many efforts to actually understand the 3D modeling of protein molecules. Okay, that how exactly the 3D structure of proteins are. However, in 2022's, the DeepMind Alpha Helix named AI company or AI bot actually decoded the 3D protein amino acid molecules. Okay. So it was actually a very well celebrated model which was entirely done by AI without any human intervention. So there are certain patterns and certain things in which AI can be used very, very efficiently, better than humans, because human have certain way of thinking and AI has its own way of thinking. So I think together human and AI can actually make up a good friendship bond for the best of the scientific research community. And the core principle for all the authors, I would like to say that AI will assist and authors will decide, right? You have to always make a key check while using AI in scientific paper, which is, does this make sense? Is this information accurate enough? Are these references for real? And therefore, human oversight at every stage is a must while you are using any kind of higher version AIs. So thank you so much, everyone, for your patient listening. And I hope I have actually made some glimpse, successful in giving some glimpse of the topic today, as it was a huge one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for such a wonderful presentation, because actually it's a quite informative for us to learn about how AI works. And thank you, ma'am. Now, following these informative sessions regarding the presentations on all the topics, we are moving forward with to appreciate and recognize the hard work and the dedication of those who had contributed to the success of this event. First of all, I would like to present appreciation certificates. Let me share my screen. Okay, so before we're moving forward, I would like to introduce manuscript peer review process. We will going to provide a complete demo session on the MPRP, as it is a eminent tool, like it's a very important tool for us to use, complete the peer review process. So we'll provide you a demo session for this on the day 2 of this event. So stay tuned with us. And regarding the editorial workflow, how manuscript will submitted and how it get accepted, complete peer review process will be explained by tomorrow. Please stay tuned with us tomorrow also. Now, as I told, we have to appreciate all the blogs who submitted to us for this event and contribute toward the successful completion of this event of this day 1. So now blog certificate. I would like to appreciate Dr. Sakari Mustafa Hidgi for as his blog is selected as the best blog for on the topic, the role of reviewers in maintaining the quality and integrity of in the era of AI. Next will Dr. Komaljeet Kaur. Thank you for submission, ma'am. Next, Dr. M. Kishore. Thank you for submission, sir. And Dr. Drishti Sagar. Thank you for submitting your blog, ma'am. It's very informative. Next, Dr. Vikas C. Mishra. Thank you for submitting, sir, your blog. And Dr. and Mr. Himanshu Dubey. Thank you for submitting blog, sir. It is very informative blog, and all the other blogs are already posted on the website. Please go visit and read over there. Now it's time for awarding our speakers. First of all, thank you for giving such an informative presentation to us, all the speakers. They're actually quite an informative session. Now, I would like to thank Dr. Sankalp Yadav, sir, for giving such an informative session on MASH term. Dr.
Oh, pleasure
Ketki,
indeed.
ma'am. Thank you, sir. Dr. Ketki, ma'am, for guiding us how actually AI work. Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful session. Dr. Hannah, ma'am, thank you for guiding us how actually ethics process we have to follow while using AI. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And now I would like to call Dr. Nikita, ma'am, to conclude the today's session. Nikita, ma'am. I'm stop hearing my share. Continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you for um, presenting your presentation on the mesh terms, on the AI integrity, research integrity. So, before concluding, I want to share you some insight on this on the basis of abstracts of all of the presentation did today. So, as IP Innovative is an integral part of all policy making institution, and we are following the COPE guideline, I say MJE guideline, NISO, Council of Science Integrity, Science Council of Science Editors. So ethically, I want to share some highlights of today's presentation and its impact on the research. So, if an AI tool recommends the rejecting of paper, as Dr. Hannah also shared the ethical prospect and ethical use of AI in even today's presentation, in previous presentation, which is also available on the website of ours. So, how can we ensure the transparency when the algorithm decision making process will be opaque? So, it will be very important if the AI tool should be giving any type of reviews, then we have to work on that also. Then loss of distinction. Can any AI ever replicates the expert intuitions required to judge groundbreaking or unconventional research that challenges existing data pattern? Dr. Hannah Madam had started her presentation with a retraction in Lancet, right? So, and just think of it. If this is the human error, right? Then, if this happens continuously on the data existences by the distinction of AI use tools, then who will taking the responsibilities of this unethical provision? So, definitely we the I mean for the support, we must take the help of AI tools, but the ethical responsibility is always of human researcher, right? So the third point which I find during this presentation is how do we protect the intellectual properties of authors if manuscripts are uploaded to the AI system that may use get data from their trained future models, just like Dr. Ketki madam had mentioned in her presentation. The pre-published data, if we will share it with someone, the ethical requirement of a peer reviewer is that they never disclose the data to anyone, right? So how we can share the data with the tools? So we must be careful during using any familiar type of tools during this. Then finally, the human centered governance. Also, just like I say MJE guidelines, which Dr. Ketki had mentioned in her presentation. So we must be maintain the globally evaluating ecosystem, which is in the top lead models of ethical frameworks like OECD's, that is emphasizing accountability, fairness, and need of human oversight to ensure the AI supports rather than replace their own expert judgment. I don't, I mean, I'm very much thankful to Dr. Sankalp sir, who covered very beautifully the importance of mesh terms here. And the take home message which I find from here is that the precision in discoverability. So this prevents the valuable research from being lost due to the terminology variation. Just like sir had mentioned during his presentation, that the impact of using mesh term also enhance the impact of the journal as well as your own in a form of H-index and citations. Then assisting in the peer review process, reviewer must use is in a mesh index databases, which is create the novelty of the research, right? When systematic validation is also very beautifully covered by Dr. Sankalp. Finally, the standardization by categorizing research into the hierarchical structure, Maystem provide a common language that bridges the gap between author, reviewers, and global readers. Ultimately, which improves the quality of evidence system, that is the research ecosystem, right? Then, lastly, I want to cover few points for our backbone of scholarly excellence, that is our peer reviewers. So your expertise matters a lot, and latest helps you to share your expertise with global platform. So at IP Innovative Publications, we believe that integrity and advancement of scientific research is a shoulders on the dedicated peer reviewers and the editors. So on commencing and helping you out, we are trying to give you a continuous training and workshops like this, so that we each we all of us, we can exchange the knowledge on the peer review and coming segments like AI, etc. So we want to recognize every reviewers and their hard work. So we are showing your name on our website. It is on the public profile and your visibility on our website. So it is under the editorial board and reviewer hall of frame, right? You can also find a certificate from innovative publication. So we will share you the link to download your certificate as a great contributor into the research. Then finally, there are credit points we also allocated for the reviewers, which Dr. Hannah mentioned during her presentation, and we will share you the more details on this in the tomorrow session also. So stay tuned with us, and thank you for your participation. Thank you, Dr. Hannah, madam. Thank you, Dr. Sankalp Yadav. And thank you, Dr. Ketki, madam, for your valuable presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, sir, there is one question for you. So I guess you already answered it. That is some application for the MESTEMS is available like that. Yes.
Yeah, actually, it is. We will make a short video on this on our website, and we'll upload it. I guess that will be much easier for our new reviewers, and it will be easier for those who are actually looking for these specific terminologies, how to use them, and the tools which are available, easily available to to access all these things. So don't worry about that. Stay tuned. We will upload it on our website.
That's so kind of you. So, hip hip hooray, peer reviewers, all of us, that we are getting the direct input and a short video how to assess this all information, right? And
Yeah.
there are few questions which is I'm very much thankful to Dr. Hannah and Dr. Ketki, Dr. Sankalp sir, who had already answered it online. So thank you everyone, and stay tuned for tomorrow.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
So we would like to extend extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this reviewer training workshop a success. Thank you, IP Innovative Publication, IESRF, for this organizing this event, and all our respected speakers, Dr. Hannah ma'am, Dr. Sankalp sir, and Dr. Ketki ma'am, for sharing your expertise with us. And additionally, I would like to thank all the attendees, support team, on all the peer reviewers who contribute toward and participate to and commitment to promoting the best practices in peer review have been invaluable, and we appreciate the time and effort you took to make this workshop success. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I request everyone to stay tuned with us for day 2 panel discussion also, and we'll like to welcome you tomorrow also. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great time. Thanks.
Same here. Bye bye.